Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching POLITIRIXX. I'm Michael, and we have Soledad and Dean. How you guys doing?
Hey, all right.
How you doing?
It's tomorrow's the official day of spring, and it's also Women's Month. So, Soledad, can you tell us a little bit about the history of Women's Month?
Yeah, gladly. Now, as you know, last month was Black History Month, and September 15th to October 15th is National Hispanic Heritage Month. And those months generally were designed to commemorate achievements in those communities. But Women's History Month actually has a different genesis. It actually started in commemoration of International Women's History Day, or International Women's Day, rather, which is March 8th. We talked a little bit about that last week. And believe it or not, in many countries around the world, Germany, Poland, a lot of the Eastern European countries, Lithuania, Estonia, Russia, that's a real actual holiday. But it is not in the United States. And the irony is that International Women's Day, actually started in the United States. And it was initially started in 1909 to commemorate there was a march that was held in New York City in March of 1908. And that was to commemorate, this march was actually held by the International Ladies Garment Union Workers. And their issue was mainly protesting the use of child labor and protesting the terrible conditions that existed in factories in the United States at the turn of the last century, with the start of the whole Industrial Revolution. And if you ever read the book The Jungle by Upton Sinclair, that factories they just had all kinds of what today would be violations, but there were no regulatory agencies at the time. So you had, again, child labor, you had people working very, very long shifts and in very perilous conditions. And so when the ladies marched in New York City in 1908, they were unfortunately met with terrible police brutality. A lot of the women were actually beaten by NYPD officers, and it just did not go well. So the following year, they started International Women's Day to commemorate the march and kind of bring light to, the conditions of workers, not only in the United States, but around the world. And in a really sick twist of irony, of 1911, just a few years later, was the infamous Triangle Factory fire in New York City. And what that was, there was a factory in Greenwich Village in Washington Place. It was an 8-story factory, I believe, a shirtwaist factory. And a lot of the same women who'd marched in 1908 were the very same police officers who'd beaten them had to carry their charred corpses, because 123 of them died in that fire because they were actually locked into their place of business because the owners, the factory owners, decided that they weren't entitled to a lunch break. They actually locked them in the building. The women couldn't get out, and those who weren't burned alive had to leave to their death. And that's really the kind of tragic genesis of Women's History Month.
Wow, that's a lot.
Not a real cheery subject, but what's kind of sad is we touched on before when we were talking about slavery, is that our episode on slavery is that a lot of things around the world. So it's not an issue that has been put to rest. We're still dealing with this.
Wow.
And even the U.S., and just to kind of bring it to the forefront in terms of why that's relevant today. And I know before our debates kind of degenerated into a name-calling match, you actually had, when you had Rubio and Cruz talking about these different agencies, and I think Rubio referred to the EPA as the Employment Prevention Agency or something to that effect. But today I actually was doing a little research on Karen Silkwood, who was a union organizer in the 1970s. And there was actually a film with Meryl Streep made about her and her very tragic death. I would even suggest murder. But she raised issues. She worked in a nuclear plant that was owned by Kerr-McGee in Oklahoma. And she raised, awareness that the plant was, had terribly lax safety procedures and policies. I mean, at one point, 60 pounds of plutonium were found missing from the plant because they had such bad inventory policies. So, again, even in our own country, these are still issues that are coming about and are still with us, so we can't dismiss them.
Well, you know what? Let me ask this to Dean first. Of course, Soledad, I want you to chime in there on it. When Hillary Clinton, that's running for president of the United States of America, she, maybe about 2 weeks ago, for that week, she definitely threw out some comments like, well, you know what? I am held to different standards than others, and you should know what that feels like. And she was referencing an African-American male. And do you think it was fair for her to play the sex card, in 2016, saying that she's held to higher standard when it really was all about her being transparent with the emails, things going on that happened in Benghazi? It was like, well, wouldn't that be something that a man would, you're vying for the presidency of the United States of America. Do you feel that she's... Mm-hmm.
Well, you want to, yeah. I'd say I was calling the card because if it was a white guy calling, he probably would have been hit with treason or been arrested by now. She gets away with too much. Way too much.
Well, except Donald Trump hasn't been arrested for inciting riots.
We're not.
So, I would say,
Inciting riots. They're not letting.
Well, we can.
Look, I didn't talk of. He's. I'm not. The groups are behind the riots, inciting it. He's not inciting it. You want to talk inciting? Let's talk George Soros. Let's talk Bill Ayers, who was there. Let's not just blame it all on Trump.
No, but he is accountable for his language.
He's accountable. Hillary's accountable for 4 dead men in Benghazi. How about that?
You know what? And that's, but Michael has a point that, we do need to hold everybody accountable equally. So, you know what? I do think that Trump, and actually Brandenburg v. Ohio, states that he should be held accountable for his language when he's offering to pay legal fees for people who...
Hold Hillary accountable for what she's done.
That holds Hillary accountable too. Exactly. You have to hold both accountable. Gender cannot be used to explain, to dismiss,
right.
To dismiss illegal actions.
So we all agree to what Michael said, that she played the sex card. So there's your answer, Mike.
Yeah, but how come? How come no one's attacking her for it?
But it's actually unfortunate to play the sex card because it diminishes from actual real cases of gender discrimination in the workplace. And I'll just give you an example from my own personal history. I was working for a rather terrible law firm that shall remain nameless, but I actually managed a group of attorneys and paralegals because we were 24/7 firm. A group of attorneys and paralegals that were on our night staff, and I came to find out that I was actually earning significantly less than some of the men I was supervising. So to me, that's a real gender discrimination issue. So Hillary Clinton should not then bring in, the issue that, like I'm being picked on, when it really has nothing to do with gender. And I don't see that as holding her to a different standard. If there are questions about it, then answer them. I mean, it's just that simple. But, it kind of irks me, like, the famous Betty Broderick case where she was accused of murdering her ex-husband and his new wife, and she tried to make it seem like, it was a case of domestic violence. And I'm like, no, it wasn't. You didn't even live in the same home. You broke into his house and shot him. So I think when women unfairly bring that card up, it's detrimental to all women who have real issues, to deal with.
It's interesting you said that because there are a good percentage of women that are just going, voting for Hillary because she's a woman, or in theory. And it's interesting, at least that's what it's put out there. But I know a lot of women that don't want to vote for her. So what do you? They don't feel they trust her. Sorry, go ahead.
were people like Madeleine Albright kind of saying you have to, that, if like it's the womanly right thing to do to vote for Hillary just because you're a woman. And I'm like, no, that's no, that's not, any more than, I would hope that people that say, for instance, African American voters didn't just vote for Obama because he was African American. I mean, I don't vote for somebody based on their gender or their race or whatever. You're supposed to look at the issues.
Yeah, well, many of them did. And I remember when Dukakis was running for president, and I got flack for not voting for him because he's Greek. I'm like, look, I don't like what he stood for. I'm not voting for him. That's it. That's the bottom line. To me, you don't, if that's what you're voting for because she's a woman or he's black or he's Greek or whatever, then you shouldn't vote. Because if that's basing it on, I mean, that's the most dumbest. I'm not. I like everything about that except, he's a Boston Red Sox fan. I'm a Yankees fan. He's out. Right. That's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's the dumbest thing,
Right.
And you think, well, actually, this brings up a point with the media, because there was a good amount of African Americans that didn't run to the Obama side because they didn't want to, and they actually were offended that the media kind of put it out there that, well, you'll just vote for Barack Obama because he's black. And a lot of people did not vote for him at all. In fact, they scrutinized and looked at him even 10 times more because they didn't want to just fall into this commercial trap. And there are a lot of women that feel the same way, that they're not going to vote for Hillary just because it's a woman running. And I found that it was mixed from the people that I've interviewed. It was 50-50. Some really like Hillary for issues and this and that, and the others, like, they don't trust Hillary. And not because she's a woman, just because she keeps flip-flopping and exactly. Not staying consistent.
How can we talk about trusting her in issues where it's the same coin, the same side of the coin with her? She's flipped on so many issues. What are you voting on her issues for?
And the only person who's brought up issues was Susan Sarandon, who she was the one who called it and said, look, I didn't like the way she voted on Iraq in the first place. This is why I'm not supporting her. And as a woman, I was actually really offended at Gloria Steinem's comment, like suggesting that women were voting for Bernie Sanders to try and meet men. I'm like, I don't know any woman who thinks that way. Well, and coming from Gloria Steinem, that was just beyond insulting.
Some of them do think that way. Gloria thinks that way, and whoever listens to her does.
Yeah. which is ironic, because she always kind of positioned herself to be a feminist.
Last week, and I think earlier last year too, they brought out how Bernie's talking about equal pay for women, yet the women working for him are getting paid less than the men are.
Well, and you know what? And that's an interesting point, which actually we could talk about. How in other countries women are actually getting some steps forward, but in many ways in this country, women are either going backwards or not progressing at all. And the ERA amendment, which was the Equal Rights Amendment, goes back to the 80s that they tried to pass that, and it still has not passed. And interestingly enough, an Equal Rights Amendment would ensure, as in my case, that I would, or any woman working, would get equal pay for doing the same job that a man does. And interestingly enough, in terms of other countries, Tunisia, a Muslim country in northern Africa, just passed their own version of the ERA. They redid their constitution. They were part of the whole Arab Spring movement, and they just implemented an Equal Rights Amendment that says you cannot discriminate with regard to employment against a woman or with regard to anybody because of their gender, and you can't offer them less pay because of their gender. But in the United States, as messed up as it is, that's still not illegal.
Just because they pass it doesn't mean they're going to implement it.
Well, that may be.
Just like when
here we haven't even passed it.
The anti-slavery laws, the Jim Crow didn't implement it, and that's an interesting point too. Because remember, the black men were given the right to vote, and yet women still hadn't gotten that right. Even white women at that time.
That's right.
Even
and I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of people would be really surprised to find out some of the voting rights for women. And just an example of a country that has finally made some progress forward. Saudi Arabia this past December finally gave women the right to vote, and 17 women were actually elected to office in Saudi Arabia. But before we say, oh, look, they're so behind, this amazed me. Switzerland did not give women the right to vote until the 1970s. And other countries in Europe, I believe Luxembourg was one of them, not until the 1980s. Yeah. So, it's like, why was this issue not raised worldwide,
Women have, though, have made a lot more progress in making money than the past. I mean, we can't not be honest about that. I mean, look at the biggest music stars. They're women.
No. We can't look at music stars. We got to look at normal people with normal jobs.
I know. I personally know women CEOs who are making a lot more money than guys I know who have triple the amount of degrees that they do. So.
But on the other hand, I worked at a law firm and made less than the men I was managing in the 2000s. 2000s. How pathetic is that?
Okay.
And I had more degrees than they did, more skills, and I was their supervisor. Okay. And you would think at a law firm they would know a thing or two about discrimination laws, And incredibly, my immediate supervisor, his reasoning was, well, they're men, they have families. I'm like, how do you know I don't have a family? I mean, that's not an excuse. It's equal work for equal pay. And no, I agree that women have made some steps forward, but the fact that it's still not a law in this country, that you can still legally pay a woman less who's doing the same job as a man is pretty darn pathetic.
Well, you can also say that.
And the fact that so many people don't know that is pathetic.
But that can also go with older people out there who are getting discriminated because of their age.
But that's true. I mean, discrimination's discrimination.
Exactly. So
in
that case,
discrimination is discrimination.
In the end,
if we're
getting your job or whenever you get getting a contract with a company, you really got to negotiate the best deal you can for yourself.
But if you have two employees, same qualifications, they're doing the same type of work, it is not okay. And often it's not not necessarily be a position where you can negotiate, where they're just telling you, we're hiring you, this is what we're paying you. You don't know until you get into the company and do a little investigation. Hey, wait a minute, why is this guy making more?
Right, I understand that. They should, but you got to remember, they're trying to save as much money as possible. And if you agree to the pay they're giving it you agree to the pay.
But you have to have that information in order to make a wise decision. That's the problem. You have to be given that information. And then that's the problem, because if you let companies police themselves, they're all going to be as greedy as possible. They're trying to save every penny. So we have to have some, let me put it to you this way. You couldn't pay a black person less than a white person just because of the color of their skin if they're both equally qualified and doing the exact same job, because that would be illegal. Yet if you had a man and a woman doing the exact same job with the same qualifications, that's not illegal. So that actually leaves the woman without a legal recourse. I mean, you can hope you get a friendly jury that sees it your way, but it's technically no law has been broken. And that's the problem.
All right, well, let me throw something else to the mix. Maternity leave. What are your thoughts on maternity leave? This is a big issue. It's come up a lot during this Women's Month in random conversations, and definitely wanted to bring that to the forefront on POLITIRIXX.
Sadly, and again, a lot of people may not know this because most good companies do offer maternity leave. But sadly, again, this is something that is not by law required in the United States, whereas it is in every other industrialized nation on earth. And many countries like France actually give a paternity leave as well. So a new father can take time off to be with his newborn, as well as the mother. But in the United States, if your company doesn't just give it to you, a lot of women are forced to use a combination of sick days or vacation days, or you just don't get the time off. You can take time off. You're allowed, I believe, 12 weeks under the Family Leave Act. Of course, that you may not end up getting paid for that, and after the 12 weeks, there's no guarantee that you're going to have a job to come back to. So we're the only country that doesn't have a guaranteed maternity leave, the only one in the industrialized world.
Well, again, a lot of these other countries are socialized countries, and the money does come out of their paycheck. So it's just it. Move to a socialized country, then you're not going to get it here. They can't.
Well, not. And what if most people actually wanted it?
Well,
let me ask you, Dean, you have kids. Did your wife take a maternity leave?
Yeah. Because
now,
she worked for
what if she had worked at a company where she would have been forbidden to take a maternity leave? Company.
You know my wife. She worked a deal out where she got good time off and still had her position and came back. She worked out a deal. That was it.
But not every woman can.
Okay, I understand.
And that's
but you know what?
depending on the
Actually,
company.
it's very interesting because, Dean, you said she worked out a deal. Should the government get involved? Should there actually be a law? Another way to look at it is just capitalism. You know what? You chose a job that has certain benefits and certain ways of looking out for you. Then, if everybody seeked job opportunities and supported companies that had certain things set in place, isn't that just capitalism? Should anybody really get involved?
Well,
what happens though?
I mean, I also like one of my degrees I didn't have to pay for it because my company paid for it. You work out the deal you can. That's it. Again, it's a capitalist.
But unfortunately,
if you expect everybody, how many weeks you want off? You want the whole year off, being a maternity leave? Then why buy? I mean, what? Work then? You're asking
for 6 weeks.
Huh?
So most companies that do give maternity leave in the U.S. give 6 weeks. In other countries, they give 6 months. Some countries give as much as a year.
So how are they working? How's that work? How well are those countries doing?
Well, how well are we doing? We're not doing them that great.
Then we're not doing that great.
No problem. If you let companies, companies.
We're not doing so great.
If you let companies just do what they want, the trend is already to take away more and more from the employee, give them less and less, make them, at what point, people are going to take whatever job they can because they need a job.
Well, let me ask you this, Soledad, because I know this question has been overlooked. Is it a matter of just capitalism where certain companies just have better benefits and better packages? Is it about just the company doing what they want to do? Is that fair or not fair? Please answer that. From your perspective, Soledad. Oh, did she get cut off? Oh, I think she froze. Well, Dean, while she gets her internet, do you think that's a fair thing to say, or?
I think it's what for a company.
Yeah, you choose a company that's going to take care of you.
Yeah. I did when I was getting my degree. My wife did when she got hers. Well, what does everybody want? A handout? A company has to stay in business. And a lot of these companies, I'm sure, give money to charities or whatever. For tax write-offs and everything. But I mean, how many weeks do you want maternity leave to be? I heard her say some kind of gives you up to a year. Well, then that's might as well stay on unemployment, go or whatever.
Now, the other thing to that should
problem is when you do that, it's a risk. Okay, it is a risk.
Now,
sure,
let me throw this out there. If it's not paid maternity leave, because if you don't have someone doing the work and you're giving them money, I could see as an entrepreneur myself, how are you going to survive?
Exactly. How are you going to survive?
Because now you have to hire someone else to do their...
Let's say you do give them maternity leave,
right?
Right? You give them maternity leave. Someone else comes in, okay? Someone else comes in. Let's say she doesn't want a family.
Right.
Let's say she's younger, doesn't want a family. And let's say she's a better worker. Now what? You're going to let her go because the maternity leave got to come back? Even though she's a better worker and has done more for the company than the one who on maternity leave did? If it's your company, what are you going to do? I'll say it out there. I'll keep the new one.
Now hold this down for a second. Let's say that is the situation, but now what about socially? We always talk about kids. We always talk about how it starts out, especially from education. It starts out very, very young. Are we hurting ourselves not to support maternity leave for the growth of that child?
I know what you.
Well, for instance, I mean, it starts soon as you're born. You know, molding children, and those first couple moments are very important. So, should we, as a society, see? I could understand from a business standpoint. You know what? Just choose a business that's going to take care of you, and whoever has the best package or survive or whatever. But the business owner should have the freedom to say, this is what I'm willing to offer. They shouldn't be forced. But from the other standpoint, as a society, should we say we need to support maternity leave universally in this country because it's a part of raising the future of America? Is that fair? Is that unfair? Does that make sense? Or no, leave it alone?
That makes sense. And I see some part of being fair in it. I mean, if the company knows like they can't give you like 8-10 months of maternity leave, okay? At least they can give you a package so you can leave the company and start looking elsewhere. I mean, I understand what you're saying. From the human aspect, yeah, you know, I get that.
Right.
But the point is now the worker's child becomes the ward of the company. That doesn't make sense either. That company, a lot of companies, they'll pay tuition for your kids. They'll help pay for you know, leaving them at a what are those schools called? I'm going
preschool, day school.
Yeah, the day school. They'll help pay for that too.
Daycare.
The daycare. Thank you. They also have when you sign up with a company, they have those health accounts. Those things are taken into account.
Right.
Preschool and pre-care. You know, and you get a tax break for that too for some of these companies.
It's just interesting because if you're Apple, that's one conversation. But if you're Joey down the block and you have a very small business.
But that's the key thing. Joey's got a very small business. If he gets big enough, Joey might be able to do that.
Right.
You know?
Right.
But these big companies do offer things like that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I don't think it's clear cut because there's the entrepreneur side of it, and you're building. And I understand, you know, people need to work and they need to hold on to their jobs, and they shouldn't have to choose between their career and their family. But then from the entrepreneur standpoint, there's a whole nother bag of beans. So it's very interesting. Well, what about paternity leave? Do you think that men should be able to support their wife and come home to their, you know, help in that process of bringing a child home and not lose his job? Because it's a little different with the man's situation.
if they could do something like, I wish I had paternity leave, because then if she was off for like 2 months, then I could take off that last month, and it would have been 3 months, you know, between the two of us.
Right.
But it didn't work out that way, and well, I guess I can see situations where there might be a paternity leave. Let's say the mother dies in childbirth, and then the father's stuck with the kid alone.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Right.
But I don't know. What would you do? Would you want it? And how long would you want paternity leave?
You know, I'm trying to look from both sides of it, from the family side of it. I think that there should be, definitely not long. It should be a very rigid time, you know, maybe the first month, you know, but anything past that, no. I mean, you got to run a business.
You know, exactly. And when you have a kid, having a few of my own that I know of, there's a certain time period. There's like 9-10 months that you know you're having a kid.
Correct, yeah.
Right? 9 to 10 months gives you time to raise money and figure out what's going to get done and when. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's not like, what do you know? I had a kid, now I need maternity leave. Well, what did you do spending all that time up until that moment? Did you save any money? Did you contact, maybe you're a family member who can help out to watch the kid during the day? Did you get, did you do your research and get a good babysitter or what have you?
Right.
Hello, gentlemen.
Hey.
Right.
My Skype went on strike.
It's all right. Yeah, so, I mean, those are interesting factors. And right now we're talking about paternity leave. And there really isn't a quick answer. And anyone says this is a really quick answer is not thinking it through. So I think one of the...
and it's...
Well, because we live in a capitalist society...
We got to play devil's advocate and say, if you allow companies to just kind of offer whatever, and there's no regulations, are they, once you get our work, to say, a company can make you work, 12 hours, 18 hours, whatever they want without paying you overtime. If a company can, if you just keep going, removing, and this again was why these women fought in the first place at the turn of the century to say, no, we need some standards. We need to have some regulations saying,
Yeah, I could see that, definitely. I mean, we need standards and certain things need to be put into place, but maybe allowing companies at a particular level. I think smaller businesses should have a lot more freedom when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to maternity and paternity leave, because they're smaller companies. As an entrepreneur with a smaller company, again, if I was IBM, I could afford to let people kind of figure things out. I could set a lot of different things in place. If I was Apple, I could set things in place. Disney, obviously, they can set a lot of things in place. But when you look at, a little small tire shop, and there's 10 employees, I don't know. Do you say how many employees that make the cap? Do you say, how much you make changes things?
You said a key thing that goes, it should go along with maternity, the health care thing.
Right.
Look what happened when healthcare was forced on so many of these companies with a small amount of employees. They had to, A, either let employees go, or B, cut their hours so they would not be eligible for health insurance.
Right. Well, the thing is, because there's so much...
The company couldn't afford it.
Well, this is the thing. It's all how you set it up, because if they allow... Because there's so many services out there with health insurance, just allow a door open to say individuals can sign up because they make this amount or they do this or this amount. Like, there should be some sort of package set aside for smaller companies. Again, there's tons of large companies getting away with murder. And see, that's the problem. They're not thinking about the big ones getting away with murder, and it's like, well, everyone's going to do this, and then the small guy gets squeezed because they can't afford to make the same allowances. There should be a smaller package, in my opinion.
Okay, they get the smaller package, but then if there's a smaller package, it's going to be a finite amount of time and a finite amount of money.
Right.
Because it wouldn't be sustainable or affordable.
Well, it can be if the...
How can you say it can be if right now you saw what happened with so many companies with the healthcare?
Well, this is the, I'm not going on of exactly what is going on. I'm saying what should be there is that there should be some sort of average between how many employees you have and how much income is being made by the business, and saying, you know what, you only make X amount. So the government will say, well, how many people, because think about it, if the government supports the fact that you have a business and you're employing people, that's great for the nation. You're giving people jobs. So the government should have some sort of representative to say, you know what, I'm going to sign these people up with health care for free. You know what I'm saying? So they could set things up. I mean, again, no one's thinking outside of the box to make this kind of preparation, but it's just called being creative and thinking. I'm hiring people. That's a great thing. Would you rather them be employed? You don't see that at all.
Making it more of a socialist government than what's supposed to be.
Well, the thing is,
it's not supposed to be government at all. It's supposed to be this. The government backs up. I kept hearing you say regulations, whatever. The last thing we need is more rules and regulations. Rights is one thing, but policing and regulations, that's something else. You know, right is freedom. It's capitalism.
I hear what you're saying, but
it's a little too socialist for my taste. But you find the right the company. I mean, you can't.
Well, let's just say, no, I agree with you 100%. Find the right company, but I'm saying that in general, for where we are right now, if there is some sort of buffer, because too many large companies that can afford it are just being greedy. So if we went down the path, separating ourselves from just capitalism, choosing the right company, then have larger companies have to invest back into, first of all, if you're making billions of dollars, you need to invest back into the nation. You need to support America. You know, everyone loves to do this whole made in America. I love America. Well, then you know what? Then you need to take care of your employees because they're part of America. Like, the people make America. It's not this separate thing.
Right. There have been a few CEOs, and I know we're going to this subject. I gotta find it again.
Right.
But there was one guy recently who made like $13 million extra as a bonus.
Wow.
And you know what he did? He gave it all to the workers.
Nice.
In his company.
We need more people like him.
There are other companies that say, you know what? Instead of a title, instead of a bonus, guess what? You're now our official stockholders in this company. Okay? There are companies that do that. To say that there isn't is not true.
No, there are people that do it, but there's some sort of balance of reality that needs to happen. Like, for instance, it's called I call it, if I ever run, investing in America. Someone hit me up if they want me to run for something. But if you invest into the nation, right, Dean, you're gonna be my vice president. You better say the right things right now. The right words better.
You know what you said? I know exactly what you're talking about.
Right.
And there is an Elmer Fudd cartoon from the 1940s that says exactly what you said. And they show it. I will find it and I will put it on Politics.
Yes.
And
Do
show
that.
how take the money and you reinvest it. Take the money, and you know what? Guess what? I told you, I personally know one billionaire and four of the biggest millionaires in the country. And you know what they all do?
Mhm.
They all just take a lot of their money as a tax write-off and just throw it back into the country. Just let it ride. And they're making money and they're investing in the country. It's exactly what you're talking about.
And they need to call me and invest in this show, and that's a good segue because that's all the time we have today.
Oh my God, we're over.
So hopefully we inspired some youngins and some oldins, because guys, we're at a turning point, and this show is important because we need to share ideas. But we're at a turning point within this country and in the world where we gotta start taking care of each other, or that's it. It's gonna be over.
And there's one thing, if you ever, when you're a victim of discrimination is
Right.
when you're rejected for a job and they said you lack energy. That's their metaphor that you're too old. You're older than what they were looking
You're too old,
Or you're overqualified. Right.
That's
Yeah.
You're overqualified.
Yeah.
That means we don't want to pay you. That's what that means. We
Yeah.
found some young'un who will work for half of what you're going to make.
Basically.
For half of what you want to make.
That's what it
Thank you
is.
so much, Dean. Thank you so much,
Okay, thank
Soledad.
you.
And you guys are watching POLITIRIXX. Please check us out on Facebook and also YouTube. You can check this whole broadcast again and again and again and again. And we'll see you next week.
Have a good one. Stay warm because it's cold.